Hello and welcome back. So as you recall in our last lesson, we went ahead and created these awesome leaderboards, but it turns out that they're pretty boring because nobody has submitted any scores to any of them, and that's because we haven't hooked up the logic to do that yet. So gosh, we should fix that. Let's do that in this lesson. So I'm going to stop our application here, or I guess it is stopped. All right, go home. And so like in the last chapter, we created a achievement manager class that basically dealt with achievements. I'm going to go ahead and create our own leaderboard manager class. It's going to be a subclass of NSObject, and here we go. Now, I'm actually going to do kind of the hacky thing that we did in the last lesson, where we're going to start off by submitting a hard-coded string representing our leaderboard. I'm doing that mostly just because I think it's easier to understand the creation of our score object this way, and then we'll go ahead and clean it up in the next lesson. So this is going to have one public method, at least for now, and that will be submit score, and there's our int that represents our score, to leaderboard, and this is our NS string that's going to represent our leaderboard ID. Now to implement this, there it is. Now, as you recall, in our achievement manager, the way we dealt with achievements was by creating a GPG achievement object that we created using the class method achievement with ID, and we passed in our unique string associated with our achievement. Basically going to do the same thing with our leaderboard manager, although we don't actually create a leaderboard object, we create a score object, and this score is associated with a specific leaderboard that the score is going to be submitted to. So let me show you what I mean. So we're going to call GPG score, score to submit, equals GPG score, score with leaderboard ID. At this point we can say score to submit dot value equals the score that we've passed in, and then we tell our score to submit itself to the leaderboard. So we would say score to submit, submit score with completion handler. We get back in our completion handler two things. We get an error object and a GPG score report. The error object is what you would expect. It would display an error if something shows up. The GPG score report is fairly interesting. Let's take a look at this. So first we'll do if error, I don't know, nslog, this is terrible. And we'll have our error localized message. There we go. Localized description. Otherwise, let's just display this is your score report. But if you'll kind of notice here, we could actually look at the report itself. It's got a bunch of interesting properties. You can see here, it's got a few booleans for, is this the high score for the local player for all time? Is this player's high score for this week? Is it, the high score for this player for today? And if it isn't any of those things, if the player had submitted a higher score earlier, we can then ask, what was that high score that the player submitted earlier? And so if we wanted to, for instance, bring up our own notification that said, hey, congratulations, you beat your old score, we could do that here. We could do that by basically analyzing the score report and doing something interesting with it. In this case, I'm not going to. I'm just going to put it out to the log, but that's still pretty interesting, I suppose. And then I'm going to jump into our game model here. And I suppose after we've gone ahead and incremented and unlocked our achievements, this would be a good time to submit our score. When, at this point in the game when we've won. So, whoops, looks like I probably have to go up here and import our leaderboard manager. There we go. And then let's create our own little property for our leaderboard manager. Leaderboard manager. There we go. And like our achievement manager, we can add some lazy instantiation. There we go. Fantastic stuff. And now we can go down here and say, hey, self.leaderboard manager, let's submit our score. And this will be our number of guesses to our leaderboard. And since I am going to be replacing all of this with an enum very shortly, I'm just going to go and hard code in the leaderboard ID for our easy difficulty level. So let's go find our developer console here and go back into our leaderboards, and here's our ID for easy. So I'm going to copy this, and we'll just create it right here. So there we go. So now that we're all set up here, let's run this and see what happens. I'm going to get into my game. I can see that, hey look, my leaderboards, they're still empty, and that's fantastic. And let's go in and play an easy game. Higher than 25. Hey, look at that. 4 guesses. Actually, that's pretty good. I don't know if I'm going to be able to beat that. But we can look at the log here, and we can see that we've got our score report back, and our Boolean is reporting, yes, this is the high score for this player for today, and similar for this is the high score for the player for this week and for all time. And if we look at the high score for local player today, these values are all null. I don't believe this is indicative of the fact that this is the first time I've submitted a score. I believe these values are always set to null if what you've submitted is a new high score. So you'll either get the Booleans, equal to yes, or you will get, hey, this is the current high score is for the player that you did not beat. Now, if we were to go back and play this again, let me just show you something here. Let me play really fast. Now, you'll notice that my score report came back as null. The entire thing is null. This is a little quirk with the system. I've talked with the team. I think we're going to change this behavior. But what's happening right now is the system is smart enough to know, one, this is a leaderboard where the lower score is better, and that I have just attempted to submit a score that's higher than what I submitted just before. In this case, the system says, well, I'm not going to bother submitting the score of 5 guesses because I know that it's not any better than the score of 4 that I submitted, just a minute ago. The unfortunate side effect of that is that I do not get a score report when the library decides that it's not going to submit it for me. I'd like to see us generate a kind of a fake score report anyway, and hopefully that will happen. But I guess that maybe the main lesson to take away here is don't count on a score report always existing. You might need to check and see if it's nil, and if it is, take the appropriate actions. So there you go. If I were to stop this, by the way, and run it again, let's try it again. Whoops. By the way, I can see myself here on the easy leaderboard, both in my circles and in the public leaderboard. I happen to be first. That's fantastic. So let's play an easy game here. Oh, all right. Now, I do get back a full score report. And you can see that my, hey, is this a new high score for this player for today, this week, all time, are all set to 0. And the high score for the local player today is now a GPG score object that has things such as the leaderboard ID, the value, and the formatted score, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of take a look at that if you'd like. Again, you can kind of raise some interesting alerts in your game based on that. But at least for now, until we change the behavior of the library, you can't count on that score report always existing all the time. So anyway, there we go. We've now submitted scores to our leaderboard. This is fantastic. And if I had other friends playing, I'd start seeing them in the leaderboards as well. Let's look at the next step here in our application. And that's going to be removing this hard-coded string, replacing it with an enum, sort of like what we did in the last chapter. But I guess with one minor difference, and you'll find about that in the next lesson. See you soon.